Welcome everybody to the Four Verts podcast. I'm your host, as always, Sonny Weaver, and joining us today from EA, game designer Clint Oldenburg. Clint, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm feeling pretty good. The football season's getting ready to start. My Cincinnati Bengals are going tonight, so excited, optimistic, right? It's a good time. Along with that, though, we are getting to that time of the year where Madden is about to drop. I know there's a lot of people out there that got a lot of questions for you. Clint specifically working on the gameplay and game mechanics side of things, so we're going to hit on that. Where I want to start specifically, though, and I think a lot of people are interested in it because it seems to be a big part of the game this year, and that's blocking. Clint, I'll get into some specifics into a second, but overall, it seems like there was a big overhaul to the blocking system this year. Is that correct?
Oh, I wouldn't call it a big overhaul. I think we just made a lot of improvements that we needed to make. We took the system that we had already existing that, contrary to maybe popular belief on social media, was actually pretty good. It did a lot of things really well. We attacked problems that came up with the hardcore users primarily when they would find ways to exploit our AI, and obviously Nickel Blitz 2 made us come up with ID the mic. We really just expanded what we have to tackle those specific issues that come up over the course of a year.
Well, so with the early look at the play that we've seen released by the community members the last couple of days, one thing I noticed is it looks like pockets are forming better. Is that something you guys specifically set out to do this year?
Yeah, we worked on that. We expanded our pass rushes on the edge, so we have specific animations that edge rushers can use, and that's how we build the pocket, and we expanded on that this year. We did a lot of animation and AI work for those, and those animations are what I talk about when I'm on Twitter talking about these super wins. So we have different versions of those animations. We have defensive losses, defensive wins, and then super defensive wins. And in order to get a super defensive win, to even have the possibility to play one, you have to have a defender with a 90 rating in either power move or finesse move. And then based on the delta between his rating and the blocker's rating will determine the frequency of those super wins. And that's what I refer to when I talk about scaling to ratings. Once you get these really good players in MUT and franchise that are really great at pass rushing, you're going to feel a big difference in the pass rush.
Man, okay, so you jumped way ahead of me on there, so we'll come back to that in a second because I think there's some things in that realm that I want to expand upon. But you talk about setting a better pocket and generating those better wins. When you talk about the offensive line this year, I sent you a message early on in I guess not early on, but a couple weeks out, let's say, and I asked you, will offensive linemen really matter this year? It's something where last couple Maddens, it seems like the really low-rated offensive linemen haven't seemed to matter, and you could get by with it. I believe you're insinuating that's not the case this year. So can you talk a little bit about just why that's not the case? Does that extend beyond just the pass rushers, also to the blockers, that having those tiers of higher thresholds of being elite blockers? Are you going to see a big difference there?
Yeah, there's two things I want to point out. So the first thing is the unit awareness that was in the blog I put out, and that deals with the awareness rating. And so, like the blog said, once your aggregate score of your offensive line reaches a certain level, they're going to be able to react to blitzes faster than if their awareness was lower. And the kicker is the center, so we count him times 2. So his awareness rating replaces the lowest of the other 4 blockers, so he can bring your average either up or down, and really can affect your aggregate score. So that's one way that the ratings matter more with the linemen. The second way is just in run blocking and pass blocking. The way it's tuned for both is if the blocker has an even or better rating than the defender in either run block or pass block versus block shed, power move, or finesse move, whichever is being used by the defender, he has got a very substantial high chance to win that interaction. And whereas the defense, if they're better than the blocker, their win chance starts to increase exponentially. So let's say you have 2 evenly rated players. The win chance for the defender is probably between 15 and 20%. So he's going to win that interaction between 1 and 2 times out of every 10. But as soon as he jumps up to 5 points better, that interaction may become 30 to 40% in favor of the defender. So the ratings definitely matter. You're not going to get by with a really bad O-line this year, and you're going to see you're going to notice a big difference in performance when you start matching up really good players against really bad players.
So, and that's kind of where I think you see this early game footage, and people start talking on social media and whatnot about, let's say, for instance, they say there's no pass rush this year. Clint, why is there no pass rush this year? You've got, in these games specifically, a lot of times really good offensive linemen going against really good defensive linemen. So those win chances shouldn't really be that high because, like you pointed out on Twitter, pass rushers, what is it? I think you said 14% of their plays are pressures for even the elite guys?
Yeah, so that was one of the metrics. I did a study this year to figure out exactly how to get some data behind the way we were tuning pass rush, because no matter what we do, somebody's always upset about it. Either it's not enough or it's too much. So I wanted to get realistic data to tune it. And what I found via different outlets was the best pass rusher since they've been tracking it is DeMarcus Ware. And over the course of his entire career, the amount of pass rushes that he got pressure on the quarterback, pressure meaning he either hurried him, hit him, or sacked him, was just under 15%. It was about 14.75%. And that kind of blew me away. So that's where we started, was a base chance. If you're equally rated, it doesn't matter what your rating is, it's the delta. So you can have a 60 rated guy versus 60 rated lineman. His base chance is still around that 15%, which is much higher than it would ever be. So the pass rush ratings globally are higher than you'd see in the real life, because we have to take that delta into account. But when you start getting above that, it gets much, much higher, like I was saying.
So let's come back around to blocking. Another question I had for you throughout this cycle, one of the biggest pet peeves I had was that pass blocking halfbacks in Madden 17 always seemed to win. It seemed that no matter who the halfback was and who the rusher was, it could be Von Miller, they were always going to cut them if they came free on that side. What kind of changes have been done on the halfback pass blocking?
Oh man, that's pretty long. First, I'll address your question, then I'll go into part two. So we did tune both cut block attempts and cut block win chance for the running back, as well as standard win chance for the running back. So what we had done in the past was to supplement pass blocking 17 and prior, since there wasn't that many people using the running back to protect. We said, well, we need to give them a bonus if they're smart enough to use the running back. And so the running back had a really high win chance just because you used him. And then this last year, obviously with the nickel blitz and things like that, people were starting to use the running back more and more because we were messaging it out. And then it became obvious that it was just completely unbalanced because we were giving the running back that bonus. So we tuned it back to a realistic number. So we're also using the deltas involved in all of those formulas. And you're going to see the running back get beat quite a bit more often than he would have in the past. Now, part two of that answer is we also made the running back smarter. So before, he kind of just had one singular target he would look at and then try to react late. Oftentimes he would go up into the line and not be able to get outside if the threat was actually coming from the edge. So we slowed him down from going up into the line, and we made him actually scan both sides before choosing a target. And also he's now better at reacting to defensive linemen who have beat blockers at the line. He can react and go help those guys out much, much better than he has in the past.
And so I saw a video, I think maybe Sim had a video where that halfback did just that. He saw a blitzer come up the middle unblocked. He stepped in and he picked him up. Now, something that's new this year, you saw the blitzer kind of run the halfback back into the quarterback a little bit and then reach around the quarterback and pull him down. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, that's a new feature we added this year. We call them reach out of block tackles or reach tackles. And they apply both in the run game and the pass game. So if you're in a block and the ball carrier is close enough, the AI can reach out of the block and it becomes a 3-player animation. So we add the ball carrier into the animation and everything is organic, looks great. In the run game, it's a user mechanic. You can use R1 or L1 or RB or LB, depending on what console you're playing on, and reach out directionally while you're in a block to do a reach tackle attempt. The risk is if you're early or late on that, you could get pancaked by the offensive lineman, or the tackle could be broken by the running back. So there's a lot of different outcomes that happen there. Same thing in the pass game. The only thing we don't have in the pass game is it's not a user mechanic out of the two-man block. So that's contextual. If you get close enough, they're going to reach out contextually. And we still do have the strip sack mechanic from Madden 17 that you can do with the strip ball button, but that doesn't work if you're engaged in a block. I hope all that makes sense. That's a lot of info there.
No, that's the kind of info I think a lot of people are looking for. So I think those are a lot of the major ones. I know you've talked about ID Mike almost ad nauseum on the social media. Basically, ID Mike, you're just telling them who you want them to pick up, not necessarily the Mike linebacker. The misnomer maybe there applies that some people get caught up in the name itself. But I want to go back to something kind of outside of blocking that you started talking about earlier. You talked about kind of the ramping up of separation of players. So those guys with the 90 or 90 plus block shed or finesse move or whatnot. Talk about trying to separate out positions and make average guys average and elite guys better, because I know you've said that specifically in the pass rush and in coverage, that's where you're going to notice that the most.
Yeah, what we tried to do, like I was saying on Twitter, was we tried to scale our ratings better this year so that as the cycle of the game grows over the course of 12 months and the content in Madden Ultimate Team is improving and everyone's getting their 90s and the people playing franchise are progressing their players and everyone's getting into the 90s, we want those players to feel drastically different than the players you had at launch or when you started your franchise. We got the sense last year that our community, that you guys felt like over the course of the year, all the players kind of started feeling the same. And we don't want that. We want there to be a drastic difference between a guy rated 86 and 88 and 92 and 97. We want you to see a big difference so that you are motivated to keep progressing these players as you work through your Madden life cycle. That's why I want to stress to everyone who's talking about the pass rush right now based on the YouTube videos. The base rosters are generally pretty even. You don't have a ton of guys outside of five to 6 points apart. And that's the main reason you're not seeing the pass rush you desire right now. But as you get into your game modes, whatever it is you like to play, and you start getting those 90s and 92s and 94s, you're going to see things that you're not seeing now, and people need to be prepared for that.
So let's say, for instance, I'm a Bengals fan. Cedric Ogbuehi, not a very good tackle. He's going up against J.J. Watt, one of the better rushers in the game. In sim mode, on a CFM, how bad is he going to wreck my game versus the Houston Texans?
He's definitely going to be a problem, and I have an example for this. Rex plays the game almost daily, and I remember he wanted to play the Texans one day, and he was literally screaming out of his office at me because J.J. Watt was just wrecking his game, and he didn't have any way to stop him. And I guess he had a really bad tackle who he didn't know was really bad or something like that. But, yeah, if you're playing against an elite player and you don't have a player close to him, that guy is going to be somebody that you have to account for.
And so I know we've heard pass rush. We've heard in coverage. Does that kind of extend to everywhere? Because obviously the one pointed out this year was the first-string quarterback should play a lot different than the second-string quarterback. So is that kind of universal across all positions or just some positions?
It's universal across all, but the levels are different. We definitely concentrated more on accuracy for quarterbacks, run blocking and pass blocking, pass rush, coverage, and catching both on offense and defense. Were the primary focuses, so it extends a little further than that, but those are the ones we concentrated the most on.
Yeah, it appears I saw a video of Trevor Siemian airmailing like 3 or 4 out of his first 5 attempts, so it does seem to be working correctly in that aspect. So let's talk about coverage a little bit. Another mechanic you talked about, or at least somebody talked about in one of the blogs, was the middle linebacker or the inside linebackers in these defenses being able to cover a full field. Hold turbo, change directions, run around. Is that also one of those kind of tiered things where Luke Kuechly can do it, but undrafted rookie not so much?
Yes, absolutely. We did a hard look at that this year. It was actually one of the harder problems to solve and more risky problems to solve because we know how much our community relies on the lurking tactic that people like to do. And so we made it very much ratings based. So instead of just taking some 72 OVR linebacker and being able to lurk the whole field, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You're going to have a really good player who's got the right speed and the right agility to make those open field moves. So to answer your question directly, the answer is yes.
Once again, another video we saw, you guys addressed the speed discrepancy between defensive linemen being able to chase down Odell Beckham. How'd you guys go about solving that problem?
Well, what? Funny story. We started digging into it early this year, probably before we even started the production cycle, because I remember pushing to get it patched and it was just too risky. We found a pretty sizable bug in our run curves, and I believe the bug was caused by probably the same thing we're going through now, which was complaints about pass rush. We found that anyone who was ever in our pass rush assignment was getting speed boosted to an unrealistic level for the whole play. And we think it traces back a couple years to somebody saying, well, even when a pass rusher's free, he's not able to get to the quarterback fast enough to pressure him. So somebody juiced his speed along the way, and we weren't aware of that. So we found that, and we made the speed curve normal and realistic, because I think our game has grown over the last couple of years that we don't need that as it was in prior.
So those thresholds between it, and the reason I bring this up, there's a video I think where Ryan Tannehill throws an interception, and the cornerback is running back the other way, and he's got a pretty good step on him, but Tannehill eventually 20 yards downfield runs him down. But speed-wise, he shouldn't be able to do that. The other guy's speed's probably 5 or 6 points higher. Is that maybe a stamina issue, or what would something like that be?
I'd have to see it to say definitively, but if it was on sim, definitely stamina related. There is a pretty big penalty if you run out of stamina, and you're going to feel it right away.
Okay. Yeah, that was something I know that was brought up, but that makes sense because that cornerback was running 30 yards back towards Tannehill. It was just something that was brought up that I definitely wanted to address. Looking at coverages again, obviously there were certain routes last year that were just somewhat overpowered, obviously the C route and a couple others. I know it's been talked about that you guys have worked to take that away in both man and zone. What are some of the highlights and changes to coverage this year we're going to see?
Well, there's a lot of tuning, and we're still not done tuning. Like I always say, we reserve the right at any point to tune any aspect of the game that we need to keep it balanced for you guys. And coverage is one of those harder areas to get right, because if you got everyone on the field playing like superstars, you can't complete a pass. And if you got everybody playing super passive, you can complete anything you want. So it's really hard to balance, and it's something that I'm sure we'll be doing all year again, just like we have done in the past. As far as new things in pass coverage, the things I'd call out, improvements to zones. So the two of the highlights are hard flats are more aggressive in playing in the flat, and the purple zone is more aggressive in getting out and covering the corner route. And then in man coverage, I want to call out that was tightened up considerably since last year. All of this is ratings based, of course. And then the coverage mechanics that we built for mud squads, but are still there in all the other modes, that you can manually press a receiver, you can press them inside, you can press them outside, you can even press a tight end, and you can do all that on the right stick. Those things add another level of strategy to the game and usability to customize, your scheme on defense. Those things are all really big improvements to the defensive coverage area.
So let's play off that for a second. Obviously, the seems like we have a new overreaction every day. The new one currently since the videos come out has been what people believe to be the quote-unquote broken zone coverages. Now, obviously, I'm guessing they're not broke, but they're different than what people saw at EA Play. Can you guys talk about just the thought that goes into that? Because I believe a lot of people think that 20 or 30 game changers say something, you guys do it, but that's not necessarily what you guys are doing when you make these changes.
Yeah, there's a lot that plays into it. It's based on community feedback and the game changers. It's also based on the metrics we track. We're tracking stats for every game played during the production cycle and getting sentiment from internal people. And also, a lot of the changes, perception would have it like, oh, they just went and changed one thing. So over the course of production cycle, you may have, like, for coverage, for instance, let's just make an example here. For coverage over a 3-week period, maybe our QA team dropped 7 coverage bugs. And we went in and individually fixed each of those 7 coverage bugs. But at the time we finished fixing those 7 bugs, they had such an impact that coverage completely changed over that 3-week period. And while we're seeing it on a day-to-day pace, and we're checking against those bugs to make sure they're fixed, we're not seeing the entire impact until those 3 weeks are up, right? Does that make sense? So yeah. It's not just saying, oh, coverage is too tight, we're going to pull it back. It's maybe a little bit of that, but it's also compounded by fixing bugs in specific areas that have other impacts, which is a good thing to talk about, because that's why patches are so risky. Patches, title updates that everyone talks about. I talk about it. It's like, well, we're not going to go out and fix this issue right now because it's risky and people don't understand that. Because anytime that you touch anything, it definitely has splash effect that could affect other things that you don't really want to touch. And this could very well be one of those cases. I can't speak definitively to it because I don't work directly with coverage, but I know that we've been focused on that area for most of the year. And the more bugs you fix and the more tuning you do, it does have an effect that can look like it's this massive effect. All that being said, I do want to point out that there's very few people that have actually played the game, and I think you're right. There is an overreaction to that. I think people need to get their hands on the game first before asking for us to fix something.
And so it's the video game development version of the butterfly effect, where even the slightest change can have these crazy, horrible outcomes. When you talk about you're not going to run out and patch it, so in this case to I'm not even going to call it fix. Let's say to change that would probably be a patch update versus a tuner update.
We don't know. We're investigating. We're listening to all the feedback. We're looking at the data. It could be a combination of the both. It could be one or the other. But the most important thing for you guys to know, for everyone in the community, for anyone listening, is we're going to make sure that it's right. Whether it's day 1, day 10, day 15, day 20, whatever the date is, we're going to make sure that we get it right, and we're going to tune it the way that you guys want it. So there's really no reason to be, too worried about it. It's not going to, if everyone says, hey, we don't like this, we're not going to tell you guys just to eat it. I don't think we've ever set that precedent.
That's normally a good thing not to say to your customers, to eat it. So definitely appreciate you and Rex and all those guys with the way you guys do approach that. I think sometimes people look at the ability to tune and patch maybe as a it should be right from the start. I think sometimes right is a subjective term that can move and change based on things. And I think now that you guys have the different playing styles, it gives you guys more leeway in how you approach those things. So what may be good and coverage-wise for sim may be a little different for competitive. So that's something we can watch kind of throughout the year.
Yeah, and it's just the time, the time we're in. A lot of people have negative reactions to title updates, but I'm the opposite. I think it's a great thing. I mean, we live in a time where technology allows us to keep iterating on our game after you get it, and you don't have to pay for those upgrades. You get them for free. Like, I think that's a great thing. Like, maybe 15 years ago, you bought a game, that was the game. Even if you found something you hated, that was it, right? I think that it's great that we can keep balancing the game to react to our community all year long. I think it's something you really can't beat.
Exactly. We're in an instant gratification world, so everybody wants everything now, but like you said, it's nice to be able to move with those changing kind of flavors of how the game's playing and what they want. One last question for you, kind of a two-part question, and more of your own personal opinion. Madden 18, obviously, we're getting close to EA Access. Is about a week away now. You've obviously had a lot of time on the game. You sit down, you turn on Madden 18, and what part of the game, Clint, makes you smile and says, this really makes me happy that this is in the game, or that this works the way it works?
Man, that's a big question. There's a lot. I mean, gameplay sticks out to me because that's what I'm closest to. I mean, there really wasn't much of gameplay that didn't get some attention. Like, we not only put in all the new features that we've been talking about all, for the last 2 months, but there was also a large list of legacy fixes that, we put a blog out addressing those. I mean, we were midway through alpha. We were basically all concentrating on our new features, and then we put together a top 30 community concerns or legacy issues list. We slapped it on the board and we said, you know what, guys, we're fixing these too. And so we went and knocked those out too, and those can be seen in the blog that Rex posted, and we're really proud about that. Some guys, we maybe didn't get the things you cared about, but we got things that a lot of people cared about, and that's something that shouldn't be overlooked.
And so I'm going to ask you the next question. Obviously, I know you're restricted in what you can talk about, what you can say. So I'm not going to say in Madden 19, but let's just say in the future. If there's something that you sit here and you go, as much as I like Madden 18, there's one thing I really wish we could make better, or really take another look at, or maybe expand upon, what would that be for going into the future?
That's a long list too. I mean, if I just gave you my personal list, I mean, possibilities are endless. I want to expand on AI. That's my personal favorite, so I guess I'll focus on that. I want to make our game smarter every year. I want to make our players look and feel like their real life counterparts and think like them. I want defenses to react to plays they've seen multiple times. I want to stretch the boundaries of what our AI can do, and that's not trivial. That's not something we can do in 6 months or a year, but it's something that I personally feel strongly about. I know Rex does. We just want our game to continue to get smarter and smarter to more accurately reflect the NFL every single year.
And that's all the time we have today here on the Four Verts podcast. Obviously, a big thanks and shout out goes to Clint Oldenburg, who came on with us and gave us a lot of good information. We'll have more interviews coming up. Hopefully, have one here for John White in the next couple days or two. So make sure you subscribe to the NBL Network and follow us on Twitter at T4Verts for more information. For all of us here from the NBL Network, I'm Sonny Weaver. This has been the Four Verts podcast, and we'll see you next time.